Hello and welcome to this quick tutorial for Blender 2.8. What we're doing today is a simple fluid simulation. We're going to start right now. The first thing we'll do is that we take the standard cube and we transform it, we scale it into kind of an aquarium shape. So this is going to be the room that the fluid simulation is going to take place in. So I'll do that, and next thing we do is we toggle wireframe mode so that we can see inside it, because we're going to position another cube inside it right here. Gonna push it all the way down here, so the second cube acts as a deflector for the liquid that we're gonna simulate, so that something's happening in here and it's not so boring. Now what we need next is an emitter, and that emitter is gonna be an icosphere, and this one's a bit too big because the size of the emitter makes it so that more or less fluid is coming out at one point. So we're going down with the radius a bit, and then we're gonna put it over here. And so the idea is that the fluid comes out here and hits that cube. Now we're gonna take it a bit down. So now we got our emitter, we got the room where the fluid simulation is going to take part, and we got the deflector. And now we gotta assign those roles. So we start with the emitter, and what we do is we're going to the physics tab right here, and we're gonna choose fluid. Type is flow, because this is gonna where the liquid flows out. Now it's set to smoke. We don't want smoke, we want liquid. Now we choose inflow right here. It emits that. Why it's called inflow, I don't know. Outflow would be would be what I would choose for it, but I don't know. It says inflow. Now we want to set the initial velocity right here, and what we want to do is we want to have it come out right here, because if we don't set that, it's going to come out at the bottom. So we don't want that, so we set this to the y-axis, because the green here, this is the y-axis, we want the y-axis. Now it shows this direction, we don't want that, we want to have it pushed out that way. So we set this to -1, and we'll see how it goes from there. Now next we choose the cube, and we say fluid. And this time we say effector, and it says collision here, which is exactly what we want. And now this is where the magic happens. We choose fluid and we say domain, because it's the domain where it's happening in. Now obviously we want liquid here, and this is like this number shows how fine the simulation is. That's like this space is going to be filled with voxels, and you can see the voxel size right here. So if I change that number to 128, you see it's going to shrink now. But this is going to take a long time, so we start with 32 to get a rough estimate of how it's going to look like. Now the next thing to do is the time scale. The time scale says how fast the fluid is gonna behave. This number should be halved. We take 0.5 here, so it's a bit slower. I mean, obviously it is more realistic, like if we want to have water, to have that number higher, but it doesn't look as cool, so I set it a bit lower. So now we scroll down here. This shows the type of preview, and now we set it. If you set it to replay it, and you you push space to simulate that, you see that it does something. So this is good for if you want to just check whether it's working or not. This is replay. It doesn't do anything, you can't render that, but it shows you what's gonna happen, and it even shows that we hit the cube here, which is good. But what we see is that it keeps constantly flowing, which is not what we want. First of all, we don't want it to end at 50. It ends at 50, as we can see right here. It ends now. We'll set that to 120. And we see that it's constantly flowing, which we don't want. So we choose that. We choose that emitter. And now we're gonna make a setting that it stops flowing. Now, this right here says that it's flowing. So all we need to do is we set a keyframe at 20. Let's make it 25. We set a keyframe, pressing I or pressing that small keyframe thing here. We'll do that, and then we'll go one frame further. We uncheck that box and set the next keyframe. Now we got two keyframes here. One is with this flow checked, and the other one with it's not. Now if you go back, choose the domain, and now we can try to really test this one. And there are two options for that. It's modular or it's final. Modular opens up this tab here, and it says bake data. So this would bake the particles, but not the mesh. So we don't have selected the mesh yet, but we can start the particle simulation. We do that. And it's done that, and it looks pretty much okay, I'd say. I mean, it flows out. Yeah, it's not much, but this is gonna be more once we set the resolution dividers higher. It looks a bit poor, but it's gonna be better. Now, the next thing we do is we check mesh. So this generates the mesh. And what we want to do is we want to use speed vectors. This is so in the final render, if we do the final render, it will have the possibility of motion blur. So like if there's some small stuff going around here, it's gonna have motion blur. You have to set that, otherwise there will be no motion blur. So we'll set that, and once we bake that data, the data for the particles, we can bake the data for the mesh. This is why it's called modular, because you can obviously you can do this and then you can do that. It makes it faster. I mean, this if you just want to have a rough preview, you would choose to only see the particles and not the mesh, because this is the baking for this is faster than if you have both of them. So we try to bake the mesh now. And yeah, it's not much, but it's definitely there. So we can even switch the shaders on right now, which we do here. And what we see is that it's not very smooth. So we right-click here and say shade smooth, and it's much smoother. Now, once we baked it, we want to do it again, we have to free the data. Now we choose final right here. Just takes a second. And we'll put in 64, which is double the amount, and we can say bake all, and then we'll see what happens. Now we're finished with the baking, and it looks quite good, I think. So now that we think this looks okay, we're gonna set it up all the way to 128. So we have to free the bake again. and we go 128, and this is going to take some time. Now we're finished with 128 resolution, and this looks much better. You can instantly see that there is so much more detail. Now, once we have this simulation baked, we can hide the emitter. We should go to Object Properties, which is here, and we have this here, which says Visibility, and we don't want to see it in the viewport, and we don't want to see it in render. If we render it, yeah, this looks good. There's no motion blur here because the render is set to Eevee, which is faster. But if we go to the render tab and we choose cycles, which is slower, but it is more high quality, it does ray tracing and all that. And if we push F12, and if we, in cycles, we have to select motion blur right here. So the motion blur that is currently, this is 0.5. This is much too high because this is moving pretty fast. So we should set that to 0.1 or something in that range. And if we, yeah, we should. Obviously, so rendering can take quite some time with cycles. So we can reduce the resolution to 640 by 360, and that should make it a bit faster. So the motion blur is visible already here. It doesn't look that good right now because it's not shaded and the light is bad, but the whole thing is working right now. So we can switch back to Eevee, and now we're gonna add like some kind of and then we're gonna add some kind of floor with a plane. It's too small. We make it quite big. Yeah, now it's bigger, and it should be below. And that looks good. It's good enough for me. Now the lighting is bad. We could choose this standard light and make it a bit better by turning up the radius. And obviously it's not bright enough. We make, let's see what that does. Switching to camera, we see we have, this is not a good picture at all. So we can connect the camera to our viewport controls by pushing that button, or N. N does the same thing. Yeah, it's hidden here, and with view you can lock camera to view. This makes it a bit easier sometimes to get a fast picture. Now that's okay. Unlock that, and well, I'm gonna push that a bit over here. We could add a second light. That would be probably would be a good idea. Duplicate it and have a second light right maybe around here. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's much better. And now we have to shade it, and we can go to material, and that's quite easy to just, yeah, we're gonna just do something so it doesn't look that bad. We turn up the metallic and down the roughness. Now we see now the bigger the lights are, this we can see that here. The radius, the bigger the radius is, the better it will look. And obviously you can do it like that. So we got a specular highlight from that one, which is smaller, and we got this very big one right here. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Now, let's see. Depending on the computer you have, you can do that in real time, and you can preview that. That's not too shabby. We can do a test render of that in cycles. Should be a good amount of motion blur right here. We'll try that with the full resolution. So that's the one with cycles, and you can see the motion blur right here. But if you don't need motion blur and you don't need all this fancy stuff and you want to have that fast, you can switch to Eevee at any time. You should put on all those here, like ambient occlusion. Bloom is, I mean, this is obviously, this is like a matter of taste. Depth of field can be switched on. We don't have this in the camera, but I mean, yeah, okay. Screen space reflections. Motion blur doesn't affect that one because Eevee cannot do motion blur within particles, so this doesn't work. The shadows, you could set this to high bit depth. Soft shadows is okay. And then there is something, if you want to, we have a floor right here, we have this plane, but sometimes you don't want that. You want to have it so that later you want to have an alpha channel, so later you can composite it on something. So if we delete the plane and we render it right now, we'll see this is gray, and this is going to be gray in the final. I mean, this is the final render, and it's gray, so we don't have it transparent. So what you can do is you can open this here, like film. It says film here, and you can set it to transparent, and you see instantly. This will do a PNG, and it's transparent, which is pretty handy if you just need, like, I mean, you could do like a shot like this. And you put it in, you do it in cycles so that maybe there is something behind that. And this is possible with the alpha turned on. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and if not, just tell me in the comments what we should do different next time. And if you liked it, just leave us a thumbs up or tell us what you liked about it. So then, see you next time. Bye.